Well, good morning or good evening or good day, everyone. In this call, we have people from all over the world. So whatever time the appropriate greeting. This is John Dupuy again with Javi Otero, and I am the CEO of Iowa Technologies, among other things. And today we have with us Carol Greenhouse. So this is kind of exciting. She is from the Transformative Studies program, which Javi has engaged in for a year, and you're also with the Intelligent Optimist with Jury and Comp, which I've done some stuff with, and it's a wonderful magazine. It's as advertised. It's the Intelligent Optimist. It's the news in the world that's worth listening to. And I don't know about everyone, but I have to do frequent fast from the daily news. It's just overwhelmingly negative. And yeah, I mean, we're called to look into the darkness too, but I can't do it all the time. So the interesting thing about this, I have beginner's mind, and Javi has initiated mind, I guess, with Carol. So Javi, just jump in there. And so Carol, can you tell us a little about what you want to lead with? Is it the Intelligent Optimist, or is it the Transformative Studies program, or is that kind of both the same thing?
Well, they aren't the same, but I'll tell you about them both briefly.
Okay.
So, The Intelligent Optimist is a publication that started in the Netherlands more than 20 years ago. And our founders were on a hill in France one day, and even 20 years ago, before the advent of CNN and nonstop news, they were pretty overwhelmed with all the negativity in the world, and so resolved to start a company that would change that around. So that's what they did, and I came on board about 12 years ago, first working for the magazine, then later helping with promotions and other initiatives that we were involved with, and finally, I think, landing as the founder and director of our certificate courses. So we so far do two main certificate courses. One is called the Certificate in Transformative Medicine and features a man named Rudiger Dahlke, who's quite famous in Europe but unknown here in his approach to medicine, and also the Transformative Studies program, which is the one that we were honored to have Javi in this year. Those programs, one is a year long, as you said, and the other one is 8 months long. And they are a deep dive into transformation of different sorts. The Transformative Medicine program has the goal of training people to practice this type of approach to health. And the Transformative Studies program is a really multifaceted program that attempts to engage people right where they are. In terms of what they want, whether they're looking for their purpose, whether they're looking to really engage in their personal lives, whether they're looking to be part of the change that they feel in the air. Whatever it is, we try to take them from there into just a much more engaged, more interconnected, more rich and textured place than where they started. And so that's a year long. And a key part of that is what we call the incubator, which is a technology, it's a learning management system, and we've experimented with a couple of different ones. But it's a learning management system that people can engage in online 24/7, anytime they are awake, because we have people from all over the world, happily. And they can get assignments, they can interact with their fellow students. They can test their knowledge. They can do quite a whole range of different things, and it really, really deepens the experience. And I think that's why you asked me on today to speak of that and how it works.
Yeah, well, when we first started talking about this thing, Spiritual Technologies 2.0, the first thing came to mind is the internet, because I mean, I grew up and you grew up, and Javi probably, I don't know, you're a little younger than us, but there was a world without the internet. And it's very strange watching movies from the 80s and early 90s or something, and they're just like us, they dress like us, same expressions, but they don't have smartphones and they don't have the internet. And it's just been so, in my process, the internet has been hugely important. When I discovered Ken Wilber and the integral movement, it was all via the internet. I didn't meet a real integralist for maybe a couple of years. This was all on the internet. And what we're able to do now with the teaching and the connection and the worldwide, forming the noosphere, that Tyler Desjardins talked about. You know, it's really coming to fruition, and you guys have been doing it for a while. So, Javi, you wanna talk about this now and your experience of being in this transformative spiritual studies course and what it's been like for you?
Carol, to focus a bit on the incubator, but rather than explaining what it was for me, which was great, you know, I can always do that. I wonder if you could share what got you into creating that kind of platform, you know? I mean, what's your background? What led you to think, well, I'm going to use this kind of tool, and did you have any chances to test it before, or it was like an all or nothing, or were you working from intuition, or, you know?
Yeah, I am a real dyed-in-the-wool fan of these programs, and that's because it has quite a bit of history with me. The first time I ever used one, I was in a consciousness studies program at the Graduate Institute, a master's program, and they used Blackboard, I believe. And within a couple of months in that program, I was online and I would check it regularly throughout the day and see what we were assigned to speak about particular concepts. And they were, I think, you know, integral concepts, spiral dynamics, things like that, really, really deep stuff. But we were supposed to talk about it. That was part of our studies in the incubator, and we were supposed to go as deep as we could. So, you know, for several months there I was talking about it, typing back and forth, giving my perspective, somebody else listening to somebody else's perspective. And then one day I was looking out. The window in front of my computer, and I was really working with a concept, and I was trying to get to the bottom of it, and I was kind of pushing against somebody else's ideas about it and trying to formulate my ideas in a way that made sense to me and made sense to them. And I was typing and I was looking at the spaces in between, outside the window, spaces in between the branches of a big, big tree. And I had what is my first and only spiritual experience, really, the experience of non-duality. And it was funny because we were studying that sort of thing. We were studying during that period, not that exact, you know, not at that time, but we were studying. Ken Wilber has ideas about states and stages, and so it was a non-dual state experience, and it lasted for, you know, a couple of hours. And in that time, I was able to write. Like I sort of, it was a really centered experience, and I knew what was true for me at that time, and I was able to write some interesting stuff. And then I just left the computer and took a walk and went back into what we call the real world. But they were both very real. I mean, I think that's an important part of it, that both of those worlds were very real for me. The one outside my window, but that one I wouldn't have gone as deep into that as I did because of the technological world right in front of me. So it made a big difference to me, and I always loved that kind of communion, because we would in these brief residency programs, you get together usually at the beginning and often at the end, and in between, or you know, each quarter or whatever it is, but in between you're only doing your work either by yourself or in communication and connection with these other people. And that was a really important connection for me. It really deepened and elevated the work that I was able to do, the way that I was able to permeate into the work by sort of working it over with my fellow students. So that I was pretty much sold at that point. And then I enrolled in a PhD program in transformative studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And while I didn't have a spiritual state experience there, I did work online in this same thing that we used last year called Caucus. You know, we called it the incubator, but that was just our name for it. The learning management system is actually called Caucus. And again, I met with students and I formed a connection. And then we went off into our own separate worlds all over the world and did our own work, but we were all in a particular holding around what the study was going to be, and we were expected to, you know, communicate at a pretty high level. I mean, we were PhD students, and we were told that we were expected to, you know, have the level of hold it pretty high, and so we all did our best. And again, I found that to be a really expansive and enriching experience communicating, because when you're communicating, when I'm communicating with you right here, I'm sort of going and saying what comes to me to say, and that's one kind of communication. But when you really distill it down to exactly what you want to say, you're encouraged to speak in 1 to 3 paragraphs, because when you write something really long in this technology, it's pretty deadening to look at a wall of words. It makes you want to go, I got this other thing I got to do over here. But if you just write 1 to 3 paragraphs, it sucks you in a little bit, and you start thinking about those things. And even if you are doing something else over here, you find you're thinking about it. And then after a while, you want to come and sit back down and type some more. And so through those 2 experiences, my graduate experience and my doctoral experience, both using those programs, I was sold. And I also did a master's that was low residency before this came into popularity, a master's in writing. And so we used to mail off packets once a month. And that was really the only contact that we had with our teachers, is we would mail a packet off and they would mail a packet back. And also, we could call or we could informally email other students, but there was no structure for that email, for that communication. And I did form, really solid bonds with those students as well. But I wouldn't say that the interaction, I think that something was really lost in terms of the interaction day to day, week to week, in those periods where we weren't meeting, that could have really been a lot more enlightening or inspiring than it was. But anyway, so I came to it with that background, and I knew as soon as we started to talk about doing a certificate program, I knew that in addition to the telecast, which we were already doing, I knew that I wanted to bring the learning management system and have that be part of what we did.
And you guys sit together or meditate as a body of students or with faculty?
We have a meditation teacher, and he sends out daily meditations, but he's never actually meditated at the same time. And we are going to be pioneering this year a different type of learning management system. And so this one is going to be called Canvas. And in this one, for the first time, we're all going to actually be able to be physically present on the screen at the same time.
That's awesome.
So I think that will be a big difference, and may really spark ideas like all of us doing something together, like meditating.
Something that you mentioned before, and we talked about this actually during last year, which I call group resonance, if you will. Can you speak for that experience that you and I both had this year as well, of a lot of people trying to make sense of what they're learning and how they might be transforming, and trying to communicate that either by writing or whenever there were live presentations, and how that somehow informs the actual learning process, making it easier.
That's the best part, huh? Resonance is the number one, I think, law. Rudiger Dahlke has 3 laws, and I think resonance is the number one law, which is that something happens in the field when everyone gets into resonance. And we could spend the whole time talking about resonance, but when everybody is off doing their own thing in their own home all over the world, I don't think there isn't a way to pull that together in a way that creates resonance, or at least I don't know what that way is. When you have a vessel, I would call it, where everyone is connected, where everyone's speaking. I mean, it's best if people meet beforehand, because then you really have an idea of who you're speaking to. But even in the way we did last year, where nobody had met at the beginning, gradually over time, part of it is the actual interaction, because you interact with somebody and somebody has the same idea, and you really connect with them. I mean, I can think of several instances of that happening. Like somebody immediately, within the first week or two, feels like, oh, yeah, I do sound. Oh, yeah, you work with sound? Okay, cool. And you're immediately connected in some way. And then there are other ways that it happens also. There are you can have a completely opposite idea of somebody else, and their idea can really trigger you, and you can kind of debate back and forth about that, and then it's sort of revealed that that there's common ground there, even when, even when you've been triggered, or, as long as there's you have to hold it in a certain way. I think you have to hold it in a fairly high and committed way to everybody getting what they're there for, nobody getting hurt. I mean, it's not, I was in your program. I've spoken this year. No, I think it was the other program. I've spoken this year about I've sort of brought people up when they were doing that Facebook making it personal kind of debate, and that doesn't fly with us, because I mean, we're there in a real consciousness creating vessel. So but even that is a great lesson. I mean, if something's going awry, if somebody's really triggered, then you can focus on that within that vessel. And I just found ultimately the more that people are involved, the higher the frequency that they get tuned to, until the folks who are the most involved are really feel connected to all of the other folks who are really involved. And even the folks who are not very involved, though I think that they carry with them some feelings about, I should be, they don't feel as connected because they're feeling like they're not putting in as much. Even those folks are really sort of carried in that vessel. So that's a little hard to explain. Maybe you could explain that better than I have, but they're along with us in a certain way, if they are participating at all, So yeah, and gradually people feel like other people really get them because there's been enough conversation, and so then. We had a residency in our other program at the end of this year, and the people there, then when you finally meet again, you have a real connection, even though you've never met them before. You have a real connection to a person, and there's a little bit of a warp because they're not the same as you might have pictured them to be, or thought they were, even though they're small pictures. But that some of that will probably be different this coming year because we'll all be on screen together. But yeah, it's been you feel after you meet them like the ties are really deep then. So it creates human ties, and it creates a real ability to go deeper in the work.
Again, you're working with people all over the planet, and this is just happened in human history. I mean, just poof, we were the first generation to experience the internet that hadn't been born into it, and now the generations are coming more. They've had this, their whole life, this sense of connectivity. And I like what you said, Carol, about having your spiritual non-dual experience while you're studying online. And I've worked with clients all over the world in different continents, and I was noticing the new version of Skype has their faces up, instead of these little things right up there. And I was thinking, wow. I love this guy in Australia. I worked with him for a long time. We're really close. We've never been on the same continent. And that's the kind of connections that are happening. And I also, when I began must have been about 11 years ago to meditate and do integral practice and get into the integral thing, all the teaching was coming from the internet, and I didn't meet all these people till later, so I started going. And I think that's still very important. And I was teaching at JFK for 4 years, and I would show up. I'm still living here, but I'd go to the Bay Area and do 6-hour thing with the students. We'd get to know each other, and then it was all online. And then at the other end, I'd fly out again, and we'd have another 6 hours. And so we kind of were able to, very nice, have a blend of, and the rest was all online. But we made the connection, and it worked really well. And they're very powerful classes, and it was about addiction. And and my assistant and I, we'd read the papers, and of course, we're saying, how's addiction affected your life? And, and I kind of had this idea, well, these are just graduate students getting ready to become therapists, and they're studying this as kind of an objective thing they have to learn about because they're going to be treating people. And everybody had a personal story. I mean, I wept some, Heidi wept constantly, just reading the stories. They were just so poignant. But all of this stuff was made possible because of this great kind of meta a connectivity tool we have, the internet. And, it's like a few generations ago, if a tragedy would happen in Europe, we'd hear about it in a newspaper months later or something. and now we see it. We're there. We're connected. We're twitting and Skyping and this and that and the other. So the whole we get to really feel the whole world and what's going on. Whether it's fracking in North Dakota, or revolutions and slaughter in the Middle East, or gunning down of young people, young black people in the streets of our country. Whatever tragedy is going on, we're all connected now. So what do we do with that? Well, I would say you have to develop a spiritual practice, or you just have to turn it off because it's too much. And so yeah, I'm like, what do you think is going to happen? What is it going to look like in 10 years from now?
Oh, I can't wait. I mean, gosh, I've been waiting for the 10 years from now scenario in a big way. So I think it's going to be really present. I mean, the best possible experience that you ever have on Skype when somebody's big and you feel like they're right there. I think we're going to be able to have classes where the students, not even just feel like, the students are right there. And it's not going to be this awkward. We're really suffering through the first years of this and getting lots of hate mail from folks. And in addition to these long courses, the Optimist does a series of 4 to 6 week courses, and there are lots of problems in those courses in terms of technology, and we're all just beating our heads against the wall, trying to be the first really to come up with a technology that really makes you feel present. A technology where there are no sound glitches, where people with worse with internet that's not as good as other people can use it. I think all of that is going to take in the next 10 years a huge upgrade. I mean, it's already starting with Adobe Connect, which is what we're going to be on this coming year. Much more present, to be able to scroll through. You can't get everybody online at once yet. I mean, not on the same screen, but to be able to scroll through and look at 100 or 200 people, and have them be able to just start speaking if they want to speak, or raise their hand and speak. That's a whole different ballgame from what we've had, which is a talking head, and people able to email questions in, or people able to indicate that they have questions, but they need to be checked out beforehand before they can go online, and then we can bring them online, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes they're it's going to get much more ironed out, and it's going to be like an ordinary classroom, only better, because it's going to be a real international classroom where people can, come 24/7 and show up and do this and do that, and meet in groups, breakout groups, and you can instantly splinter people off into groups of 5 or whatever number you want, and have them work on something and then bring them back, and then they can present what they've worked on. It's going to be just a very much more efficient, intimate, I guess. I think that's a really important word, intimate way of learning.
Yeah, and I've been reading that in this coming year, well, the year we're currently in, 2016, the first virtual reality helmets or goggles are really going to be out there for the public. And, when we start getting more three-dimensionality and we can move through realms and stuff like that, it'd be very interesting to see what it could do with education, for example, what we're talking about. And we have a friend who is he's a cameraman in Los Angeles, Hollywood, and all he does is 3D movies now. And there have been studies that show that when it's a 3D film or educational film, that the young people, the students, are picking up the information like 40% more efficiently than just 2D. So it seems to stimulate and impress the brain more. And so as we move into that, and of course, Javi and my work has been with sound. And with iAwake, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, about 20% of the orders now, people actually want CDs. And the rest is just, they just download it directly from the internet. So we have this transformational tool going all over the world. There's no physical, carbon footprint. I mean, obviously there is. We're carbon, beings running around breathing and stuff, but it's much more minimal than it ever was before. I mean, it's truly a extraordinary event on the internet, how we can start enhancing meditation and spiritual practice through technologies that don't even have to be physically transferred. You just have to have the right receptacle or device, and boom, there you are. You can start meditating like a master from the get-go. And we interviewed Bill Harris a couple of weeks ago and talking about this, and he said, and he's done a lot of studies, and he's kind of one of the grandfathers of getting this technology, real pioneers out in the world. Not the first, but right there at the beginning. And he said that he thinks that just that speeds up the meditation process by about times 8, which is ridiculous. It's like meditation in doggy years, say doggy years, 7 years. And so, if Bill is in the ballpark, and I think he is, that means 1 year of meditating like this would have been like 8 years of meditation before, and getting kind of the same results. Saying you can do this in a daily dedicated way. I mean, that's just, well, thanks, universe, And so, I mean, and obviously all these things could be used for ill, and really horrible things, terrorist networks, or, pornography and drug, I mean, all the shadow and the negative sides of humanity are also represented. But yeah, how can we, just keep pushing this? And we've struggled too, trying to get the right technology and da da da. So, I mean, the internet gods are actually smiling on us, right now. I mean, you guys are very clear, and I hope, I am too. But we've had a few things where we've had to stop and reboot it. And I forget the name of the company, but they're creating a modem that will use existing fiber network, whatever is out there, and increase the speed like 10 times of your internet reception without changing how it's being delivered right now. Just a modem. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm imagining that some people, maybe not in this audience, but I'm imagining that some people who are watching this may be sort of internet haters. And, there's so much of that. I mean, there's this internet haters, there's folks who are feeling like we're going to hell in a handbasket just in general. And yeah, I mean, we're the optimist. So what we see is that, there are all these hassles with it. There are all these problems. And at the same time, it's really, I mean, there are problems anyway. There were problems with the classroom. There were problems with, certainly huge problems with the old ways of doing it, leave no child behind, all the way up to, to classrooms that cost, $50,000 a year, and all different sorts of problems that come along with everything. But this is, and it does have that shadow side of like, oh God, we just, Alberto Villoldo was just going gangbusters and we lost him. Now what do we do? Now we're getting all this hate mail from students. But on the other side, balanced by that, we have really special moments. I mean, our final presentations, when all the students, not all the students, many of the students came on and gave 20-minute presentations about what their experience had been, what they'd gotten from the program, what they were going away with. I mean, some of those were just magical. They were just magical because people brought a bit of who they are. And it's a little, it's a little less intimidating to bring you who it can be. A little less intimidating to bring you who you are. Honestly, I'm in an empty room, actually. In reality, I'm just sitting here talking in an empty room. I mean, it's not, I don't have to stare at people right across from me. And so, Javi came on and played some beautiful, beautiful music, and different people came on, played music, read poetry, read a story they'd written, did all kinds of amazing things, and you could feel the people that were on the screen at the same time could sort of feel, I think, the tightening of the web that held us all together. Would you agree with that, Javi?
Sure. Yeah. That's why I asked you as well about how the group behaves. I think it's really interesting in many ways through the interaction during the course and when we're all sharing space time, like now, the three of us.
There's a lot of different energy that happens when people can actually see each other talk, and you're talking like something happens in that, and that, in addition to shaving that away and having all you're putting out there, your distilled ideas, something about it, and even more, when you add that third component of actually being present, something in those sharing those different ways of being with each other really enriches the brew, rather than just twice a week going in, sitting down in your chair, watching a student or watching a teacher talk to you at the beginning, at the head of the room, and then leaving after an hour and a half, maybe catching coffee with somebody. But there's a way in which you start to get to know everybody, and everybody starts to play their own particular role, starts to sort of hold down a different piece with whether they're, we had one student who was always drawing little simple. She was illustrating ideas about. She would go into hospitals and illustrate ideas. Everybody would choose a word. They were sick. People who were sick, and she would illustrate their word for them. And so we got used to seeing like a lot of stories about what that was like and illustrations of words. And then somebody else would be really struggling with something, and so we'd get used to that would be a component of it. It makes a shape. It makes a shape in a way that going into a class twice a week for an hour and a half and leaving doesn't.
And we have a whole world of knowledge at our fingertips. I mean, you can ask almost any esoteric. I have this 5S, iPhone. I can ask old Siri, and sometimes I get dumb answers, but 9 out of 10 times it'll lead me right to information about a certain subject. And we'll notice that more and more, and people are just having conversations. You go, oh yeah, hey Siri, what about blah 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 blah? It's like today I was thinking about the Second Amendment, and the whole gun crisis, and the different parties, and President Obama trying to say, okay, let's have some sanity with this. Let's try. I mean, I'm pro with what he's trying to do. Yeah, crazy people, gangsters, psychotics, skinheads, blah blah blah. Probably shouldn't have automatic weapons. I think we can probably say that 11-year-olds shouldn't have AK-47s with banana clips full of it. It's just like, hello, people, come on. But then I said, so what's the Second Amendment say again? Which I memorized it at one point, and I just went back just to check it. What were they talking about? Well, they're talking about, it says in the first line, a well-regulated militia. Talks about regulation in the first thing. So anyway, I'm just saying that
we don't have to go to the library anymore.
No, it's incredible. And I went to a library at the university that I graduated from because my nephew was graduating from there. I went to a thing, and I went in the library, and nobody was looking at books. Everybody's on computers, sitting around. It was a quiet place to come together and look at your computer. So it's like, huh? I grew up, libraries were I used to skip school and hang out in libraries all day and just read. They never sent the truant officers in. So, yeah, so what a thing. And I was thinking there's a famous rabbi, I can't remember his name, it'll come to me, but he said there's more good in the world than evil, but just barely. And I think that's probably true with the internet. There's more. I mean, with every new technology, every emergent thing, whether it's airplanes or automobiles or you name it, or televisions, there's great things that happen. Again, then there's the shadow stuff. There's people that can become addicted to the internet or addicted to games online, and I think the challenge is, and of course that's the Intelligent Optimist is all about that. How do we find and really tip the scales towards good, towards transformation, towards meeting the challenges of the times that we live in, which are great, with these new tools, which could be either, there's programs starting around the world. I think Europe was leading the way, but treating internet addiction. And, I've seen people get into these games and they get lost in it, and virtual accomplishment becomes a counterfeit substitute for real accomplishment. You get the rush, you're the master of the world and you've done 13 levels of this and you've done nothing, but play a game. So yeah, how do we make this, how do we work, those of us engaged in this, make this a positive? Well, technology 2.0, I mean, spiritual technology 2.0 that we're doing here is an effort to try to see, how the technologies that are emerging that no other generations have ever had access to, and how can we use that to inform our lives and to transform us into the best possible versions of ourselves. So,
well, that no technologies are good and no technologies are bad. Yeah. It's really people, and no people are good or bad either, in my view. But Some of the things that you might perceive as being bad, that people might perceive as being bad, once you really sink into them and explore them, they may find the juicy parts of them. And some of the things that people may experience as good, when it's when you sink into that a bit more, then I think that the quote unquote shadow sides may be exposed. So there are definitely within the learning management system. Yes, I mean, the learning management systems can be in time sink. You can be superficial on them if you want to be. It really depends on the person, and that's actually a weird thing that I'm going to try to put into words for this next course in our materials, because what I've found is that two people taking with the same opportunities in this course will come out with two very different outcomes. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'll say this is a bit more evident with our other course, Certificate of Transformative Medicine. I mean, there were certain flaws in the way that we did things in that program, and those flaws could either be turned around and come out being positives, or they could really, really be torturous for somebody. So it's a question of with whether you're a student in the technology or whether you're advancing the technology, it's a question of what your approach to something is going to be. Can you see a roadblock as an opportunity? I mean, I think that's one of that question is one of the main things in our program, and it also relates to the technology. Can you see that you can see, I can't be in a room with these people. I find this really flat. We get all kinds of complaints like, this it's not pretty enough. It's not this. It's not that. And yes, you can kind of carry on with the it's not this, it's not that thing, and then you're not going to get it. You're going to miss it because you're too busy talking about what it's not. But if you sort of say, okay, it's not these things, that's fine, let's put that over here, and then say, well, what is it? And with an open mind and inquire into that, explore that. I can pretty much guarantee that's the key part of this technology. I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to come out with something pretty amazing. Maybe you'd like to look at what we did last year to get a sense of what it looks like.
You bet. Yeah.
Okay, so this is only one different type of learning management system, and this is called Caucus, and it's a very it's casual programming. I mean, you can pay tens of thousands of dollars for this, or this is not that, and sometimes what you're paying doesn't always relate to what you're getting. In any case, so this is our entry screen, and our tagline from the course was "Learn from the masters and then become one." And so you would just log in here, and then once you log in, this is our girl with binoculars. She's our brand logo, part of our logo, and you get a list on your left of different rooms, quote unquote, or different forums that you can go into. The numbers are the number of new posts. So you can see that I didn't actually do the mindfulness meditation, which is the list of the different meditations, or I didn't do any past the first few because it was a year long, and I didn't do the weekly kindness assignments. But here, let's see what would be most interesting to show you. Let's see. How about this? We have individual transformation, and so these were just segments that you could start. You had to tell me, and I would start them. So we did one on the shadow and projection, creating and developing a vision, fear and courage. Yeah, you can read them. But then if you saw that there was something new here, this one was interesting. Fear and courage got 100. You can look on the right here where my cursor is and see how many posts there are in each of those areas. Here's, I was saying this is a place to talk about fears, and then you can it's best if you post some visuals because that gives it a feeling of aliveness in your post. So that's what we were talking about. We were talking about the hero's journey, and so then our student Angelique was speaking about her experience with fear. And you see, we just go down. We go down. One person says this, one person says that. If you want to, you can do a breakout thread. So you can sort of start talking about, go off on a tangent and start talking about something, just that particular thing that's based on what everybody's talking about here, or you can just go down and say this, say that, say this, say this, say that. So as you can see, we spoke endlessly about fear and courage in the wake of a telecast on fear and courage, and this is this one page, and then once we get past this, then we go on to then I would click on the bottom here, and then we would go on to page 2, and continue on there. So there's that in all kinds of different rooms. There's a place where students get assignments. There's the green room, which students don't normally see. That's for the tech person and I. We looked at the feminine and masculine balance. We broke up into groups at one point, and the groups were in breakout groups, just speaking, and everybody could see what they were saying but not participate. You can do it anyway. You can do it that everyone can participate, or you can do it that just some people can participate. This thing here, the business of innovation, was actually a secret group that secret meaning that no one can see it. A group asked for their own place to speak, so I set that up for them.
Do you use video clips? I mean, video blogs you can take and put it in for the students to watch?
Yeah, there are videos in here as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, videos are embedded. Yeah, there are all kinds of different things that you can do. I mean, over here, since I'm doing this for a tech audience, this is not something I would normally show folks, but over here, this is the backbone of it. This is how you create a conference, how you rename one, delete one. You can change how it looks. You can send an email out to everybody who's involved here, or bulletin, newsletter, email-wide notification. You can produce reports about what's happening, who's seeing, who's going on, who's not logging on, frequency, all that sort of geeky stuff. So it's all here available for the organizers to look at. So.
Yeah, and I love that first phrase you started out: learn with the masters and then become one. And that's really the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And about a little over 4 years ago, maybe it's 5 years ago now. Anyway, I took up a dream. I've been playing guitar my whole life, but mainly acoustic stuff. And I wanted to be a lead guitarist. I wanted to play the blues, electric blues. And I got myself a nice old guitar and went to YouTube and just started taking the lessons there, on every level, and then playing with the masters. I mean, when you play, when I'm playing with B.B. King on YouTube, I feel like I'm somehow connecting with him, or Peter Green, or Jimi Hendrix, or any of the people that I've studied. And I think that the progress of my guitar playing was just incredible, because I was, dumb luck or smart enough, whatever, to use this vast repository of videotapes on YouTube, and I've barely scratched the surface, and I've been doing it, for 5 years, almost every day, and it's been incredible how much I've progressed and how good I've become and how much fun. It's so much better being, having a kind of a high degree of mastery in whatever activity it is. If you're a good writer, it's more fun to write. If you're a good teacher, from years and years of teaching and communicating, it just becomes more fun. And there's just these tools now that are available to us. And I had one client, he was fixing his house and doing all this. I said, I didn't know you were a carpenter. How do you know how to do this stuff? So YouTube. Want to put in a window, boom, there it is. It'll tell you right how to do it. So it's just this increasing capacity to be trained in whatever skill set we want. And I just love your curriculum. It feels exciting and feels very.
And this year, one of the things that we're doing, we're going deeper and deeper each year. This year, one of the things that we're doing is we're going to try to get some of these quote unquote thought leaders to really work with the students. Like Lissa Rankin, for example, I think is going to come on, and she's going to be more involved in the incubator. Traditionally, we haven't asked our presenters, who are bigger name folks, to get involved at that level, because we've thought, oh, they don't want to be involved. But the fact is that's where it's one of the places where the real juice is, rather than standing and being a talking head yourself. I mean, that appeals to a certain person. But beyond that, the fun, I think, for the presenters is integrating with the students and helping to spark that excitement and inspiration that you're talking about, and really support the students in becoming masters. And I think for the type of presenter that we're looking for, that's going to be very stimulating for them as well. Not to say that they're going to, do the most in-depth, spend hours online each day, but to be there to answer questions, to see what the students are going through, and to be able to tell a story that sparks something, or I think it's really valuable to have that those mentors and those masters really be at a human level, rather than being this thing up here that just speaks and collects money and goes. We really want to integrate those things into our program. So that's the effort.
Yeah, and one thing I found in teaching and speaking, virtually or on the internet, that if I'm just talking into a tape recorder or a video camera, it is completely different than if I'm talking to a live group of people. Even if I can't see them, I can feel the field. I don't know if you've had that experience, but when I'm talking, it's a different experience. It's like the difference between playing with yourself and then playing for a live audience, or playing with other members in a band. It just changes the dynamic. And that comes across for me via the internet. And of course, Javi, you've been doing this stuff, with subtle energy, and I don't know what the science is behind it, or it's just emotional impression, but it seems to be truly something is forming in the field when we interact live via the internet.
What do you think, Javi?
Yeah. Well, I would like you to say what you think, because John and I talk about this quite often in the weekly calls, and I know you really like this subject as well. And also remind me that I want to ask you a question about transformation when you finish with this, please.
Okay. So, traditionally, I have not been a confident speaker. And I taught also in a room full of students, and that was always difficult for me. I was always sort of faking it, like really, okay, I can do this, and going in and doing it, but not ever really feeling very comfortable. And I think that this has given me the opportunity to get more comfortable. And then, I feel now like you and Javi and I are, there's a connection there. And I also feel like there are other people in the background who are making this possible. I know that there are, and if I focus more on them, if I focus my attention more on, okay, let's the three of us all focus on the people who are in the background making this happen. I do feel like that comes more into awareness. So I think it's a little bit a question of what our awareness and our focus is on. So if we bring our focus back now to just the three of us, and we sort of create a smaller vessel. I mean, it takes a minute for that to develop again. It's not instantaneous. It's real time, and energy time might be a little bit different, but we can sort of recreate that smaller holding again. So both in how we are in a classroom, which is, okay, I am here and I'm putting my energy out to this thing, all these folks that I can see, or how we are in the incubator. Well, I can't see anybody, but I'm gonna I feel something here with this person that I'm really resonating with, and so that's good. And yeah, there's this other thing happening over here with look, this is turning into a whole, this is blossoming and blooming into something I wasn't even expecting, and look, there that is. Wow. I think there's a question of what's happening energetically versus what's happening before our eyes that really becomes much more obvious when you're online and dealing with these technologies, because we're used to only having what's in front of us be what exists. Whereas it becomes sort of evident, I guess what I'm trying to say, that that energy exists a bit more when you're in these programs, because the people aren't so much always in front of you visually, but they are in front of you in some kind of a sense. Now, so when I said, let's sort of connect back out to the people who are running this broadcast, did you feel anything different?
Well,
Yeah, I did.
I did, and it reminded me as well of maybe the easiest way of wording this would be what we called in one of our many discussions, the power of being witnessed. You know, it's like you're giving yourself to a bigger audience, if you will, in this case.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking to you, Carol, and John, but all this other thing that tends to be in the background, and who knows to whom we're talking to, because this is going to be seen ongoing. Maybe in 3 years' time, we're going to be talking to somebody we don't know yet, and they'll make an amazing connection, which is amazing.
Okay, so let's try that. We can connect now to the people who will be watching this. Who will be watching this in the future. Okay, we're sending our energy out to those of you who will be watching in the future with the idea that this is a really inspiring and enlivening broadcast that shifts your perspective in a way that enables you to do something different that you've been wanting to do. So things become more possible energetically, I think.
And talking about shift of perspective,
Yes.
I really want you to share a little bit about transformation. For example, I tend to find that it's very easy to focus the need of transformation out there. We want institutions to be transformed. We want other people to be transformed according to our needs. And, so because you and John both have mentioned the word shadow a couple of times, and we've done a lot of work on that during the course, and it's central to our Awake as well. Where would you put the balance between individual transformation and transformation out there? Can the world change without one trying to make the change in ourselves as well?
So yeah, that's a great question. And it's the foundation of what we now call transformative studies. I didn't think up the idea of transformative studies. It was the idea behind the doctoral program that I was in at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And I believe that there are one or two other places where transformative studies exist. But it was, I think, founded by Alfonso Montuori, who was involved in our program at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And the whole idea behind it is exactly that. Is that process feeds itself. The parts of the process feed on each other. That changing the world is very much about changing yourself, and that changing yourself equally has a component of changing out there, and that's because of projection. We're all involved in this giant, which I think is a fairly new, concept. I don't think that people 100 years ago necessarily knew about projection. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's certainly a new concept among those who are working at the edge of what I'm calling the new mainstream, because when we're looking out and we're seeing, oh my gosh, all these terrible things that are happening in the world, and we look back at ourselves, we can see, maybe, or at least we can start to see, that there are places where we're trying to make everything good, and we're trying to be happy, and we're trying to, have everything be on the positive end of the spectrum, whereas life is perhaps, a mix of those things. So when we're shearing off all of the unhappy, it goes into what we call shadow, and then needs to be played out somewhere. So it can be played out in a relationship. It can be played out in terrorism, and anywhere in between there. That's the philosophy of the times that I'm working in any case. And so in that sense, it's really important in transformative studies, to be aware of that interplay between I and we. And also in between projection and the work it takes to take that projection back, and reintegrate what we call good and what we call bad, and ultimately, I think, recognize that this is part of the philosophy of the Transformative Studies program, that there is no bad, that those things that we consider bad when we're coming from one particular level are actually super catalysts that shift us into the next step. But if we shear off everything that's bad and we try to just live in the light all of the time, it creates lots of different problems. So that's a key part of the Transformative Studies program, and it also, it's something that can be played out quite well within the paradigm of technology, because we have the advantage. We don't have people who are triggered and who are screaming in each other's faces. We have the advantage of people who can take a moment and think about what the principles that we're working with are before they respond, and they can sort of shift and adapt. It's a question of speed, really. It's a question of for me, I'm not a person who says the perfect thing right away all the time. And I think that there are those people, and those people should teach in classrooms. But I'm much better if I go take a walk. I'm much better if I go running, and then I can come back and speak to whatever issue it is with a much higher level of consciousness. So I think that this technology, one of its benefits is it enables that.
Nice, and it came to me, I think on Facebook, I read there's over 1 billion people on Facebook now. That's a lot of people. But, so we've got the internet, we've got connectivity all over the world, but now it's like, how do we deeply connect? How do we take this technology? And what you guys are doing is great, because we've struggled with that too, doing courses, and so really there's a lot that goes into it. Not as easy as it looks. So how do we get that? And just, all the 4 quadrants that we talk about in Integral, how's that represented, and how do we just make this truly, the transformative medium and the transformative technology, bringing all that we have and all that we love and all our passion and, shadow and love and blah, 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 and into a way that just deepens the human experience and helps us to transform.
Fantastic question. Can you please do a conference just on that?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
No. That would be great for me.
Yeah.
So, that is where it's at. I mean, part of the question, when you first started with the Facebook, part of the question is, it's incumbent on the whoever's running the course to set the tone, create a sense of safety, create a sense of intimacy, create create an atmosphere where that can happen, and at the same time, it's really incumbent on the people who are participating in the course to understand the need for that and to bring that themselves, or to learn to bring that if it's not what they come in with, to learn to bring that to the table, because the ownership has to belong when there's one teacher or 2 teachers, 3 teachers, and 100 students. Some of that ownership needs to belong to students equally as much as it needs to belong to you as a Facebook participant. I mean, if you're gonna talk about what you ate for breakfast, you're not going to have as deep an experience. This is again referring back to what Javi was saying about how does the me relate to the we? If you're going to complain that Facebook isn't deep, well, are you writing about your breakfast, or are you writing about your spiritual awakening? I mean, what are you bringing to it?
Yeah, we ate dinner with a friend last night, and he just gave us the lowdown on people that we worked for probably over a decade. It's been maybe a decade ago. And my God, how do you know this? It's just Facebook. And I'm like, well, duh. I mean, I've got a Facebook page and I have tons of friends requests, and I still haven't quite, wrapped my head around.
You are still not on Facebook? You're running a conference for technology and you still haven't gotten on Facebook?
No, I'm on Facebook. I just don't follow it as religiously as a lot of people do. And I have the Facebook app now, so it keeps on saying, so and so. And so I'm getting a little more into it. But still, it's not. Obviously, this guy was, my friend from last night, was much more advanced, and it's used that to really keep connected with old friends and old colleagues and their careers and their families and their children and their struggles and their births and their deaths and all of this stuff, which I didn't know. It was, and some of it was like bringing up old stuff that I really want to know about. You know, it's just like, oh, I remember that time in my life. I was really struggling with this. And so it's just amazing that we have this kind of consciousness.
That's as integral. What you're talking about, Facebook, is as integral to this technology as anything, really, because it's the foundation that it sits on. It's the Facebook got us used to the idea that we were going to know what our college sort of kind of roommate's friend's daughter is doing. You know, that's quite an extrapolation, you know? I mean, to really, and I've gotten closer to these people than I ever, some of them, than I ever was back in the time that I was connected to them. And anybody who's on Facebook probably can completely relate to what I'm saying. That created the idea that there's, you know, there's hundreds of people out there that we really are connected to in some kind of a way, if only to know, oh, this person's buying a house. That's the ground zero for that connection. And now, as organizations that are working within the consciousness field, integral field, transformation field, let's take that and run with it and deepen it and really make something palpable of it.
Yeah, it's awesome. You know, and I don't know where you are in space time. Where are you located right now?
I happen to be in Vermont, though I variously, while running the Transformative studies program, have been in Guatemala and France. But currently I'm in Vermont.
Yeah, and Javi's in Spain. We're in deep, darkest Utah. Louis is in the Philippines. And yeah, when we have, you know, business meetings and we're working on revamping our website now with this whole crew, people in different time zones, different continents, all over the world working together. Fantastic. And it's also good to get together personally. I've never been in the same room well, I've been in Europe while you were in Europe, but I've never met Javi in person. And we're going to Spain this summer, in a country I've spent quite a bit of time in and love and connect that way. But what a trip. First time
But at the same time, I think it's really important, super important, to point out that I, for one, know Javi better than I know some friends, just because we've been intimate for the past year. And so what is knowing someone? Is knowing someone, I mean, traditionally it's been you going out with them, I suppose, going somewhere, you know, to restaurants or to bars or something like that, doing something with them, movies, you go somewhere with someone, or you know, have them over. But you do something where you create an experience. Often that experience is somewhat superficial. Often you could even be hanging out with these people you're talking about on Facebook and not have a very, you know, you may know how many children they have, but you may not have a very deep experience with them. But on what we're calling deep internet, you are going to have these deep experiences because, first of all, the people who are setting it up aren't going to talk about, you know, how their watch broke. And second of all, you know, the people who are the students who are coming in are hungry for that. You know, when you start a program called the Transformative Studies Program, you get people who want to go deep. So yeah, it's a great thing. It's filled with possibility.
Yeah, and I'm kind of getting inspired to actually take my whole Facebook thing a little more seriously now. I mean, you know, I've got, geez, I must have thousands of friends, whatever that means, but I haven't been contributing, you know. And, you know, if you give and you go deeply and you risk and you show up, it's like when you're doing a therapy group and one person finally says, okay, I'm going to talk about what's real, you know, and it just, the whole group just goes, wrong. You know, there's a connection because one person had the courage. And some of my biggest breakthroughs in therapy is when another person's been talking about their depth. You know, Mr. Introvert, don't want to talk about it, male type. It's really helped me a lot. So yeah, this is kind of cool. And I really like the idea of deepening.
Maybe you should sign up for the Transformative Studies Program. We'll be talking a lot about that male-female blend and about really opening up, and join us.
Awesome. Very cool.
Thanks.
Wow, that's terrific. Maybe we ought to kind of wrap this up now. Javi, do you have any like final questions or comments?
My experience, and you know, it could be, I suppose this could happen in many ways, but in my experience, the amount of transformation that you can take in a situation like the course that we shared this year it really is very much dependent on how much you give yourself out. Okay, so for example, I have tended to be exploring a introversion, wouldn't like to share many things. I could never dream of talking to an audience right now, sharing this with John and Carol. Maybe last year I would have created the space for being in the background, not having to be talking or seen or anything like that. And so this year in the course, as you know very well, because I shared a bit of this, one of my main goals was to be sharing as much as I could, which is why, funny enough, you and I have a connection now.
Yeah.
Because if I could have been just watching, and I could have transformed in many other ways, that we wouldn't be here talking now. So I don't know if this relates to your experience, or how can you maybe share with people signs or patterns of that maybe somebody is transforming, or you are managing to be a catalyst for the transformation,
I can say a couple of things. One is that we had a number of people in the program who were not very connected, but who seemed to have gotten a tremendous amount from the program, which surprises me. Like, we had this one student in the Certificate for Transformative Medicine who turned up, who flew from California and came to our final residency. I had heard from him in the program like once, and he was a certificate student, and I thought he wasn't getting anything. And it turns out there's a requirement of participating a couple of times a week, substantive posts, and he didn't do that. And it turns out that he just learns a different way and didn't really see fit to talk to me about it, but was fully engaged, and he created this amazing technological thing, so that a digital presentation of all the work that we had done. So there are 12 archetypes in this work, and so each archetype went in the computer world to someplace else, and there was something beautiful there, and he was just created this amazing thing that showed me clearly that he was toward the top of the class, certainly participating, and so everybody takes from it the way that they can, the way they want to at that time in their lives. Maybe a few years ago you would have, taken something different, and so now you're taking something that's more palpable. And that again, that's an illustration of when you become brighter, it enables more to happen in the outside world. When you slough off that stuff that's preventing you from really being present and showing up, then you show up for people, and it's not like an intentional, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to improve the program, but you just by showing up, just by excavating yourself, you show up as someone who's got lots of sparkly things and waving a wand and with music trailing behind you, and everyone's like, whoa, look at that, and they get a bit more present, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, the people who are present are all like, wow, let's find some music and start a dance somewhere, and then things are happening, so it's like, and then because of the things that are happening, then the people are getting even more present and able to go off and do more happening things in their own worlds. And so that's, for me, the core of transformation. It's the core of this program. It's the core of the technology that facilitates it, and it's pretty much all I have to say. Anyway. Thanks so much. Javi. Bye.
All right. Hey, God bless you guys. Awesome. Thank you.